Kia ora, g'day, welcome back once again, here with another reaction, and this time answering some questions to specific parts of this interview, which has come through as a request, and whereby I mentioned in one of the other videos, this person has been willing and has paid me in advance for my reaction to these. So I'm going to dive back into this. Hopefully it doesn't take me as long, this one, and then I've got a couple of other videos that I need to go into as well, and again reacting to specific parts. So what does that mean? It means that I haven't started from the start of this. There's probably a bunch of, and maybe a bunch of other context that I don't have, but I want to try to meet the parts of what this person has asked me to look at reacting to, and so I'll jump into those to try to get those parts done first. If I feel like going back and reacting to the whole video, I may do that at the end once I finish these, but for now I'll just try and get through these parts first. So this one here is the icebreaker interview that Ben Griffin is doing with Hugh Keir, host of the HR podcast, and Ben Griffin is the ex-22 SAS operator. This video says we all have unique versions of events in a way, and we're going to jump into this, so let's get back into it.
And since 2019, obviously, behind the scenes, there's been a lot of special forces guys who've come out, or not come out, who have started to talk about what's been happening behind the scenes. That might not be in the public domain, but that's definitely happening over the last 5 years.
Wow. So that's actually one of the first points. This is where the request has come from for me to start from. So from 8:39, 8 minutes 39 since 2019 behind the scenes, what Ben just spoke about there. Definitely happening over the last 5 years, not public domain. Yeah, if that's happening, so be it. Good for those operators. Ben, I think, as I've mentioned multiple times, this is a different level again in terms of Ben. He's vocal, he's visual. People can see him, and current operators can see him, past operators can see him, potential future aspiring operators can see him, the Defence Force can see him, so he's been well and truly out there campaigning and doing what he's doing and bringing to light his experiences of what he's witnessed, what he's been a part of. The question in here is, do you agree with UK SF whistleblowing about alleged war crimes to media? That question, do I agree with them whistleblowing to media? For me personally, no. I think there probably comes a point whereby if they're not getting the traction or the responses, the answers that they should be getting as individuals who have put themselves through have put themselves through, some might call it hell, to get to where they are, have been willing to risk it all and sacrifice it all to do the job for their mates, for the mission, for the regiment, for whatever it might be. I think there should be a process whereby they are trying to get the answers that they need from their leaders, and that their leaders are with integrity, acting with integrity, showing them that they're trying to meet those requests to get answers for that. So do you agree with UKSF whistleblowing about alleged war crimes to media? There's a key part in there, alleged war crimes. That stuff there, like Ben is talking about, he didn't physically or personally witness any torturing, but he says and makes the allegation or the statement that it was well known. I think he did say in the first interview that he knows of or knew of a couple, or there were at least a couple of people from within his regiment that knew that stuff or that had witnessed it. So maybe it's those people that he's talking about over the last 5 years. SF guys have been coming out and talking about what's been happening, so maybe that's that. But do I agree? Not going straight to the media, just because I don't think you should whistleblow and go straight to the media. Try to deal with that, or maybe not deal with it, that's probably not the right term. Try to get answers to your questions, document what it is that you do, who you speak with, when you spoke with them, what you spoke about. Go through all that process, and if there's just brick wall after brick wall being put up to stop you from trying to make sense of things for that individual, and you're left with no other choice, then probably look at going external and putting the news or the message out there. So that's my thoughts on that. Anyway, right or wrong, I would like to think you'd try to go as internally as you can and try to make sense of this and just document, record everything that you're going through, especially if you feel that strongly about it, that you want to go to the media, man, try to just cross the T's, dot the I's, if that's the right analogy for it. Do as much as you can without it dragging on too long, because that's the other thing, But if you've got a record of what you've been trying to do day in, day out, week in, week out, month in, month out, to get this information before going to the media, then it's not a case of you've left it for days, weeks, months, years. You've actually got a track record of, here's what I did on this day, etc. So hopefully that makes sense. To what extent are the Australian/NZ SAS doing this? I don't know. I think probably the closest thing from an Australian perspective may be the allegations that have been made for some strange reason just against Ben Roberts-Smith. But I think I can't remember all the words that I've said in there, my reactions to a couple of those interviews, 60-minute, or not interviews, 60-minute interviews, pieces, stories that I've done. I can't remember all the exact words that I've shared there, but multiple times throughout that, they've used the term they thought they were above the law, they thought this, they thought that, and in that whole thing, it's just directed at Ben Roberts-Smith. It just they. So is it a number of them, or is it just Ben Roberts-Smith? Because when you use the term they thought they were above the law, they wanted to get their kill count up or whatever. That doesn't sound like one person. And if it's they, so if it's me looking at them, going, they're the ones doing this, but I'm part of that team, or I know that that's happening, well then what the hell am I doing? Like, what have I done? So that's my thoughts on that. To what extent are the Australian NZSAs doing this? I can only think of the Ben Roberts-Smith allegation for some strange reason. It's just been directed against him for war crimes in terms of that space. Are they bringing out anything about capturing innocent civilians and taking them away, handing them over for torture? I haven't heard anything from the Australian side. I also haven't heard anything from the NZSAS side. So what are they doing in this space? I'd like to think that they'd be still just maintaining and using their strong moral compasses, their integrity, the value set that they have, and doing their job to the best of their ability. And if things don't marry up and match up with what they signed up for, that they question those things. That's what I would think anyway. So anyway, we'll carry on. The next part is from 9 minutes 14. So this is nearly at 9 minutes 14. So it's 8:59 now. So we'll let this play on because it might give a little bit more context, and then I'll get into the next one.
Yeah, it's a good point about the same face. Going still like that. Okay, question. Next question. All right, tough one. From Coke again. You said you'd be willing to plead guilty if put on trial for attacking civilians. It would follow then that your former SAS colleagues deserve to be imprisoned as they attacked and knowingly delivered civilians for torture too. Would you testify against them to achieve this? I am glad you are getting asked that question.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, not me. Yeah. Getting asked that kind of question. Yeah. My God.
So what we're talking about here is what are we talking about?
Just pausing there for a sec. That is heavy, man. Heavy question. But hey, if these are the words that Ben shared, that he would be happy to plead guilty for his part, I can't remember exactly everything that Hugh just read out there, then it stands to reason, which is the question on here, whether Ben would testify against former SAS comrades over their complicity in the torture of innocent civilians. And I think basically that is the question that's been asked him. So let's hear what he has to say, and then I'll give my response to the question which follows.
See, the thing about all questions is they narrow the focus. They bring things in to a very specific point and then say, what would you do about this?
I mean, I think that's a good thing, because the better the question, hopefully the better the response and answers that you can get. That's just my thoughts anyway. But I think I understand what he's saying. And I think it makes Hugh chuckle because of their previous interactions in their other interview.
Lacking context, is that you?
No, not lacking context. But what I'm trying to say here is, so the question is very specific. Would I testify against my former comrades in a court if they were accused and on trial for their complicity in the torture of civilians? But see, what that leaves out of the room, out of the question, out of the courtroom, as it were, the metaphorical courtroom or the hypothetical courtroom, is the other people involved. So, one of my points of view about this is that all too often, when there's been wrongdoing by soldiers, as in this example, or the police, or any state forces, what happens is there's some sort of inquiry or some sort of case, some sort of legal action, some sort of investigation, and then a few people are in effect picked out and punished for something that is systematic. So, yeah, you could pick out some soldiers and put them on trial for the capture of civilians who were subsequently tortured. But where does that stop, really? Because the people who always get away with this are the politicians, the generals, the policymakers, the people who are completely aware of what's happening, but are at 1 step, 2 step, 3 steps removed. So, yeah.
Okay.
So I didn't hear an answer to that. Maybe it carries on, but I'll jump into the question that I've been asked. So we've heard, I don't know if that's the full answer, but we've heard the question from Hugh Keir, from one of the, I'm guessing one of the subscribers, followers of his channel, to Ben. Would Ben testify against former SAS comrades over their complicity in the torture of innocent civilians? Ben's given his answer, which says it leaves out of the courtroom, the metaphorical courtroom, the other players, the people that are I don't know about ultimately, because they, like you said, they seem to get away with it, but people that, the decision makers that decide we're going to war, the politicians, the generals that are in charge, but they're 1, 2, 3, etc. steps removed. Question here, do you agree that SF soldiers who knowingly took civilians for torture, alongside other responsible groups like politicians, military leaders, etc., should be brought to justice via the courts? That there's a pretty simple question. Do you agree that SF soldiers who knowingly took civilians for torture, alongside other responsible groups like politicians, military leaders, etc., should be brought to justice via the courts? If you're bringing everybody in, to Ben's point, so that's what I like about this question. If you're bringing everybody into this equation, then yeah, if those people know that you're grabbing and taking innocent civilians in to be tortured, so the question's pretty specific. You're knowingly grabbing Joe Bloggs, innocent civilian, his wife, Mrs. Bloggs, innocent civilian, their children of male fighting age, Bloggs 1, 2, and 3, whatever, taking that family, handing them over, knowing that they're going to be tortured for information, and that's been sanctioned by the leaders, by the politicians, who think that, I don't know, well, I'm guessing they're doing that because they believe that these people are guilty and that these people are insurgents. So that's a bit of a twist in it. But if you're doing that knowingly that these people are innocent civilians, I can't think of anybody that would knowingly want to do that. Politicians or military leaders, or particularly soldiers aside. You're looking to grab people that you think are guilty and or that are part of a criminal group or an insurgency. So, but back to the question, should they be brought to justice? Yeah, They should. If you're specific to that question, then they should. And then it's got question 4. If a foreign SF unit had taken New Zealand civilians, I just saw this now. So yeah, my response is yes, but I'll read this one here. If a foreign SF unit had taken New Zealand civilians for torture, knowing their innocence, and the civilians wanted these soldiers, amongst other responsible groups, punished, would you say they're wrong? No, I wouldn't say they're wrong at all. I would want them, regardless of which country they were from, I would want them to receive justice. So they wouldn't need to be New Zealand, Australian, British, Canadian, American, wherever they're from. If that happened anywhere and foreign SF troops picked them up and took them, handed them over, they got tortured, yeah, I personally would want them to get justice for what's happened. Now that's a hard, I have no idea what that's going to look like and how long that will take, etc., etc. But I don't imagine it would be easy. So that's my response on there. And then question 5, it says, would you testify against former Australian SAS colleagues if you knew they took innocent civilians to be tortured? Would I testify against former Australian SAS colleagues if you knew they took innocent civilians to be tortured? I think that probably lines up with the first part of Hugh's question to Ben. Like, if I was there and I'm putting up my hand and saying, this is what I was a part of, this is what I did, this is what we did, my team, my troop, my squadron, and it happened for days and days and days, and I tried to do this, I had these conversations with my patrol commander, my patrol sergeant, my troop commander, my SSM, my OC, like I went through, did all these things, I spoke with my teammates, etc., obviously as well as part of that, letting them know, having those conversations going, why are we taking civilians? These people are innocent. Why are we taking them and handing them over? Knowing that they're getting tortured. Why are we doing this? And if I've been trying those and I'm, keeping a record of it, like this is what I've done, and nothing's happened, and I'm being told that things are going to happen, and I'm giving it to that deadline, following up, and then still nothing's happened. So days, weeks, months may have taken past by that time because I'm trying to give time for the regiment, for my peers, for my leaders who I trust, who I respect, to follow through and follow up and come back to me with, hopefully some answers. If none of that's happened, like if I've done all the things that I've needed to do and I haven't been receiving the information back or back by the deadlines, or I keep getting brushed off or put to the side or thinking that I'm just going to get sick and tired of bringing it up, then yeah, I would look to go to the next stage and just say, let my leaders know, hey, listen, I've tried this. I'm not getting any answers. I'm going to go and do this. I need to go and do this. That's a hard conversation to have, but it's something that I think needs to be done. But in saying that, it is 100% easier said than done. No, I acknowledge that 100%. So thankfully, I haven't been in that situation, and I can resonate with Hugh's comment. I'm glad he was glad Ben was getting asked that question and not him. Would you testify against former Australian SAS colleagues if you knew they took civilians to be tortured? And that's the key part. If I knew that they were taking innocent civilians, so there's 4 key parts in here. If I knew that they were taking innocent civilians, so knowing innocent civilians, so the second and third, to be tortured, the fourth part. For me, it doesn't really matter whether you're an Australian SAS or just a regular force soldier. If I was part of that, and if that's what I did, and it's weighing heavy because you can't look at yourself in the mirror, then you got to do something about it. Well, I would feel like I've got to do something about it. And if I've done all those things internally first and nothing's happening, well, then I've got to find another way to get the information out, to try to do my part as best I can, and as small and as insignificant as it may be, to try to hopefully stop that from happening. Does it stop it from happening? Will Ben's action stop it from happening? Does this information come out, stop it from happening? I have no idea. I honestly don't. So that's a tough one. Anyway, that's this one. I'm going to stop this here. because there's another part. So these were the questions that came from this particular icebreaker that this person wanted my take on and my response to the question. So hopefully I've done that. So I'll pause this one here. Geez, that took 20 minutes. And I'll wrap this one up and then have a look at the other ones and then look to give my reactions to those and then hopefully bundle those together into a video. So appreciate you, if you made it this far. Keen to hear and happy to hear your thoughts, your comments, your feedback, whether you're a soldier, whether you're a civilian, whether you've served previously as a veteran, or whether you've never served. Whatever thoughts and comments, everybody's entitled to their opinion. Opinions are like noses, right? Everybody's got one. So feel free, fire away. My responses are my responses on the fly, with a list of questions which have come through without having seen the other parts of this particular icebreaker, but going off what I've seen when I did a full reaction to, I think it was his first interview with Hugh Keir, which went for nearly 2 hours, that interview, and it took me seven reactions to get through that. So anyway, I'm here for it. Comments aren't deleted or hidden or blocked or turned off. Anybody can have their say and add in whatever they like. So, and it will sit there, because your experience is your experience, your comments, your thoughts, your input are valid. And people, depending, some people just be muppets, and just type in random rubbish which has got nothing to do with it, but can't do anything about those other than just leave them there and think, oh well. So yeah, feel free. Add in, chime in if you like. As always, the message is the same. No matter the challenges, difficulties, hard times, trials, struggles, keep turning up, keep staying in the fight. Know that these miserable times will not last forever, that the sun will shine again, that there are better days ahead and they're closer than you think. So as always, go always a little further. Remember, who dares wins and who cares wins. And until the next video, there's a big mana wave coming from me to you, filled with my aroha, respect, appreciation, and gratitude for you all. Kia ora, g'day, welcome back once again. So in this video, this is a separate video. This is after the icebreaker, continuing on with the requests to respond to questions from one of the channel members here. And this video is, I will not wear that rancid uniform, which is a metaphor for patriotism. The interview is being conducted again by Hugh Keir, host of the HL podcast and former paratrooper. I think it's paratrooper. And there's some stuff in that in the description anyway on Mr. Keir. He's with Mr. Ben Griffin once again. And this request reaction has again highlighted specific parts. So for this video, it's the person has asked me to react to these specific parts. So 59 minutes and 44 seconds. You can see we're just before that, 59:39 in where I fast forwarded it to there. Now, I haven't seen or watched this. I did start reacting to this video from the start because I misinterpreted the request with regards to the reaction. So I've done one reaction's worth of this particular interview, but I haven't gotten anywhere near this part yet. So I'm just going to make sure that I cover off on these, and then probably we'll see whether or not I keep that reaction up, or the first, I think it was maybe 15 minutes of it, of this interview, or whether I just flag it and just leave it as is with these. So bearing in mind, jumping forward to parts of an interview without going through it from start to finish leaves likely myself open to missing context, to missing other things that have been shared or said, and potentially making assumptions that which could be completely wrong. So anyway, I apologize for that in advance, but here's the specific parts of where I've been asked to react from, and then questions that go along with it. So in here it says 59:44, how were disagreements handled in the SAS, e.g. of explosive use in civilian areas? So that's the question, which I'm assuming must come up at this point. So we'll play this, see what it is. Sorry, that's the context. See what plays out, and then I'll go through the questions and stuff that are in here. Cool. All right.
Okay, next question from Coke. You Okay, how were disagreements handled in the SAS? You said on a raid, so much explosives were used. You weren't sure how the kids inside weren't killed. After there was a huge row about the use of explosives in civilian areas. Some said, keep it to a minimum. We don't want to hurt people. Others said, fuck them as long as we're not hurt. There was a real divide. So he's referencing some other interview that you've done, Hugh, right. I'm assuming. So how were disagreements like that handled when you were at Hereford?
I think this might have been before. Sorry for cutting him off. I think this might have been. I remember those words and Ben sharing those words. Clearly, it wasn't with Hugh. It might have been the. Oh bloody hell! I can't remember the one where he's standing up and giving a presentation. Anyway, I do remember him saying those words or words to that effect. So, great question. Let's see what he says, and then I'll run through the questions that have been asked of me.
I'm not sure if there's a sort of one-size-fits-all answer.
It's a pretty extreme example there, by the way.
But in terms of how a disagreement's sorted within a human group,
how is that handled? I mean,
there's a variety of ways, isn't there? And obviously in the military, there's always the authority of rank that kind of is the deciding factor, isn't there? You know, were these things decided? You know, I can't even remember. You know, I can't even remember. Was it the case that some of us just used less and some of us used more? I can't remember.
Okay, so interesting that he can't remember. I do remember. So that question that's come through from the person, sorry, I can't remember. I think he said Coke or something. Was that the person's name when Hugh was reading it out? Like, I do remember Ben specifically using those words, that there was this divide. I think the home that he spoke about, when they blew it in, the roof nearly collapsed or something, and there were a whole bunch of children inside on mattresses and stuff. So, and yeah, he mentioned how nobody died, and theirs was dumbfounded, or words to that effect anyway. So, and I do recall him saying that there was a row about it. Some people were more maybe concerned, and others were like, F them, as long as our guys are all right. So, yeah, that is, like Hugh said, very specific and extreme example. Obviously, as time goes by, I'm guessing here, maybe for Ben, you know, things maybe become a little bit hazy, but that's the same for all of us, myself included. Anyway, question 1. Would the views of 2-2 SAS, where some soldiers cared about civilian safety and some didn't, when it came to using explosives on raids, be similar to the views you'd expect Australian SAS would have for civilian safety on raids? Would they be similar to the views? Man, that's... I honestly have no idea. Yeah, I don't... Possibly. There may be some in the camp being more conservative, conservative, more safety conscious of civilians. And then there may be some that just like stuff them. Like, we're, as long as our guys are all right, like, we need to go in hard, fast, speed, aggression, all that sort of stuff. Surprise. So, yeah, hard one for me to, like, would it be similar? The views of the 2-2 SAS, a couple of different camps there, the tension that may have been there. So Ben used the words, there was a row that broke out and there was a definite divide amongst them. Yeah, I think there's always going to be divides in a place like that, even in the military in general, just because of people's different life experiences, and operational military experience in general, training, etc. So, yeah, I don't know if the views of Australian SAS would have been similar or identical or completely different. I'd probably lean more towards there'd probably be a lot of similarities in regards to views and opinions of a situation like that. All right, that's that question. Question 2, would the Australian SAS be more or less concerned about civilian safety on raids than 2-2 SAS? Again, I don't know. I haven't spent any time with 2-2 SAS in the opera. I've spent time and worked with former 2-2 SAS operators, but in the private security sector, not on operations, not on raids, not having been through their selection in their unit. So that one is, I couldn't answer that with any sort of authenticity or honesty at all, in terms of would Australian soldiers be more or less concerned than British soldiers, if I was to just break it down like that. Take SAS aside, you could use that for a whole number of different things, and I just went to the military side of things. I don't have the answer for that. So you could throw New Zealand in there. Would New Zealand SAS, Australian SAS, British SAS have more or less concern for civilians than the Americans, or than the Canadians, or than the British? Like, I honestly don't know. Too hard for me, that one. Anyway, the next part is for me to skip forward to 1 hour, 17 minutes and 30 seconds. And it says here, SAS soldier holds child at gunpoint. Ben challenged this. So this will be interesting. So 1 hour, 17. Let's skip forward. 1 hour, 17:30. Let's go from here.
Perceptions willy-nilly. Influence people to carry it on. I know what you mean. Okay. Coke. In a raid. In a raid, an SAS soldier held a child at gunpoint, unjustified in your view, and you said, "What the fuck are you doing?" What was the outcome? What was the outcome of that? Also, what was the outcome of the explosives row? Did people challenge these people? Did people challenge the guy with that kid?
Yeah, I challenged that guy.
Okay.
Yeah.
What was the outcome?
He put his weapon down. And you
good
can
man. Good man. I mean, you good man.
No, but so is he. Like he. Anyway, so that was the outcome of that. Yeah. The explosives thing, like there's so much that it's difficult to. It's very easy for us to sit here and come up with reasons for things, like put together, and it would be there would be some truth in it, but it can never be the whole picture, could it? Like with things like that, in terms of the use of explosives, like we can never know what was going through someone else's head. We know what they're saying to us. We don't know. We just can't know.
Yeah, I know what you mean, but there are principles, right?
Yeah.
There are principles by which you would think that most people in their right mind commonly adhere to. Like,
let me pause it there so I don't get too sidetracked. And I'm so used to just listening to reactions. This is strange and foreign to me to be stopping and skipping forward so far, or starting at not the start. Although I've done that a couple of times with regards to the Radisson Blue with Kyle Morgan and stuff. So this is, but then I've gone back to the start and then worked my way through. So this is, trying to make sure that I get to these points. So anyway, this piece here, SAS soldier holds child at gunpoint. Ben challenged this. Question put to me: if an Australian SAS soldier held a child at gunpoint when not needed, how would other SAS soldiers react? I'd like to think they'd do the same as Ben. I'd like to think they'd challenge them and go, "Hey, put that down." That's how would they react? That's what I would like to think they would do. That's what I feel like I would do. You got a child, or a female, or even an adult male that is, now I don't know the context of the situation, but if they are clearly unarmed, you can see that they're scared, their hands are up, even if they're here, but you've got a good picture of them in terms of the threat that they pose, for want of a better term. Bearing in mind, everybody's probably going to have the weapon of the soldier, or my weapon, pointed at them at some point, until such time as I think, and I would say the same for the other operators and that as well, or soldiers in general, until such time as we think, okay, yeah, this person isn't a threat, I can lower that down so it's not pointing at them. My finger's always outside the trigger guard anyway, unless, lethal force is going to be used, and moving that person, weapon in a safe area to put them somewhere else. They may still be handcuffed, cable tied, whatever, just to make sure safety of everybody else is there. But yeah, would SAS soldiers, if an Australian SAS soldier held a child at gunpoint when not needed, would other SAS soldiers react? I'd like to think that they would, but I'd like to think any other soldiers would as well. But Ben may have just been the guy there that saw that at that time. Who's to say that other SAS soldiers, if they had seen it, wouldn't have done the same? Other 2-2 operators, they probably would have. Who's to say that the guy that's got his weapon tracked on the child right now, or at that time, wasn't going to lower his weapon and take it off that child once he had been satisfied that this was a definite non-threat and that there was nothing else to concern himself with, because that person's thinking of himself and also his teammates. So, there's lots of what ifs. We don't know. He could have been right on the just about ready to lower his weapon and then move that child out of the way. So who knows? But that's what I'd like to think. Next question: if an Australian SAS soldier had to an Australian child, had done that, I guess, to an Australian child, what would be the response by his unit and the law? The law, I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. If an Australian SAS soldier had done that to a child, what would, point the weapon at them? Hey, the reality is, they're going through raids, SAS or not, soldiers or not, everybody's a threat when you're going in. When you get given a mission pack or a target pack, and you've got to go in to look to capture and or kill individuals, like the women, the children, maybe not so much the little toddler babies, but teenage children. Everybody's going to have the weapon pointed at them if you get in there, surprise, attack, speed, all that sort of stuff. Everybody's going to have a weapon pointed at them at some point. So, and that's likely happened a heck of a lot. So with regards to Ben's earlier comments, when they blow into homes and go through running around, there's no doubt weapons would have been pointing at everybody in that home. Women in one, children in another, men in another space, segregating them. There's going to be weapons pointing. So what would the response by his unit be? I don't think there'd be any response as long as it's within the boundaries of what it was that they were going in there to do. Okay, so things would come up if you're now executing people. I would like to think and imagine that things are going to come up, but I don't think anything would come up from the regiment, and I don't know what that equates to in the law. I don't think there's anything legally wrong with that in terms of the task that you're going in for based on the information that you get. Would there be a worse response than doing that to a foreign child? If an Australian SAS soldier had to that to an Australian child, what would be the response by his unit? If an Australian SAS soldier had done that to an Australian child, sorry, I bloody completely missed that. So if it was done to an Australian child, what would the response be by his unit? Again, I think it's the same situation. If soldiers or police, the tactical response group or federal police or, police in general and military, so the SAS, if they're given a task to go into this home and there may be armed perpetrators, insurgents, whatever you want to call them, threats in that home, and there may also be women and children in that home, the operators are going to try to be as careful as they can with the potential perceived non-combatants, the women and the children. But they're going to go in there elevated, high ready with regards to everybody's going to be, their weapons are going to be up and they're going to be tracking on a person, because until you've cleared them and you know that they are not a threat, you're going to treat people as though they are a threat. But again, that training, that skill, that competency, that experience comes into play in terms of knowing when to take your finger and place it onto the trigger and when to leave it outside the trigger guard, when to have your safety catch off and when to have the safety catch back on. So, law-wise, I don't think the SAS would be doing that to an Australian family or within an Australian home unless there was some sort of legal need for it. So I think they're going to be covered in that regard. Then the next question, would there be a worse response than doing that to a foreign child? A worse response. Not sure what you mean by worse response. I don't think there's a worse response. I think it's SF operators, regardless of where they come from, are going to play the situation that's in front of them, that they're presented with. If there's resistance, there's going to be extra, aggression used to stop that resistance from stopping them from being able to do their job, if that makes sense. If that means that it ends up being lethal force because the resistance is just, to that level, and the person is clearly looking to attack and shoot at the soldiers, then, lethal force is probably going to be used. But would there be a worse response than doing that to a foreign child? Man, you're talking SF operators that train with a high degree of being as surgical as they can. They're not perfect. Mistakes may happen and will happen and do happen in training and on operations. It's there's no point trying to say that they're perfect and that doesn't happen when everybody knows that just can't be. And clearly that's not the case, because accidents do happen and will continue to happen. But I don't think there's a worse response, whether you're a foreign child or an Australian child or a New Zealand child. The guys are going to operate to what they see in front of them. That's just my 2 cents. Next question. If so, is this unfair in your view? So, yeah, if there's a stronger response or a worse response to an Australian child on here to a foreign child, if there is a difference, so I'm pretty sure I've said, no, I don't think there's a difference. They're going to play they're going to operate and do what they see play out in front of them. And yeah, that's just my take. An individual's perspective of what's worse would come down to, people observing. If you could watch different scenarios, if you could watch all the ways that raids are potentially done from UK, from America, from Australia, from New Zealand, from Canada, from whoever, then you might, people might draw opinions in and around, they seem to do it a lot nicer, or whatever the case might be. Man, they're really aggressive, or whatever. Again, each of those situations, unless you can try to create the identical scenario for each of those, they're always going to be different. Some may look harsher, more aggressive. Some may look more friendlier, for want of a better term. But I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all in response to any of these questions, although I think they're great questions. If so, is it unfair in your view? Yeah. I don't think I went to any point of saying, yep, that there would be a worse response. So I think it would be measured and considered depending on the situation or the scenario or the mission that they're going in for. So, no. If things did happen, it would be hard to imagine that, right? Again, leaning back on the training, the selection processes, the stuff that you go through, the training that you go through to be deemed suitable to work in a unit like that would be few and far between. And if there was a lemon in there who decided to be a real F-wit, then, I'd like to think that person isn't going to last long in the unit. That's just my take. There's too many good people in those units, UK, Australia, NZ, US, Canada, etc., referring to the Five Eyes. There's too many good operators in those units that have been selected for good reason, gone through a rigorous process that would outweigh any numpty that's in there looking to try to, be a dickhead, basically. All right. So that's that one. I'm going to end this one here because I've gone over 20 minutes. Not that I was aiming for 20 minutes, but I thought I'd get through these a bit quicker. Clearly, I haven't been able to do that. There is another video, which I'll go through that as well and look to jump. Actually, I'll just jump into that now. So vid 5, because it looks like it's in the same part. Where are we? 1 hour 49:57. So I'm going to skip forward to that and just do this here and just carry on. 1 hour 49:57. Oh, here we go. This is a good place to get up to. So we're just before it, and we will carry on with this one.
Yeah. Okay, from Coke again. As organisation,
Coke, the guy Coke, well, I think it's a guy, has got heaps of questions. But I'm glad that Hugh is reading them all out. So,
but also down to the average member. Again, as organizations, but also down to the average member, were the IRA, Iraqi insurgents, and Taliban morally better or worse than the British soldiers they were fighting? Ooh. Ooh.
I mean, there's no way of sort of measuring that. There really isn't. You know, like it would be just.
Hey, listen, right off the bat, I agree with that. Like, IRA, Taliban, Iraqi insurgents, morally better or worse than the UK military soldiers. How the heck do you measure that? Like, I think that question, and it's probably a good question, I think that question's been posed to Ben because he's served in Northern Ireland. He's fought against the Taliban, and he's obviously fought against Iraqi insurgents. So he's in a far better position than I ever could be to be able to give his response. But I like his initial comment, and that's why I just butted in then to thing. But let's hear what else.
Something made up, you know, to try and suggest that some are morally, as a unit, as a whole, as a collective,
both, as
morally
an organisation
superior.
or as an average member.
Yeah, I mean, does it matter? What does it matter? Is it even measurable?
I think from the sense of, does it matter? Just my thoughts that come to mind. Does it matter? I think it matters to clearly those organisations, to the Taliban, the Iraqi insurgents, the UK soldiers, the IRA. It matters because regardless of who you are, which side you're on, everybody believes that they're fighting for a worthy and just cause. That's my interpretation of these things. Palestinians, Israelis, you know, the Israel, Iran, Ukraine, Russia, everybody believes, and the list goes on and on. Everybody believes that they're fighting for a just cause. And so when you're saying, does it even matter? Well, it matters to those individuals and to those groups and to those organizations. That's what I would say. And I think that's pretty common sense. Everybody understands that and gets that, I would imagine. And then from the position of this person, Coke, and their questions, yeah, I can't see how anybody could measure that or hand on heart say we are morally better than these people. I know I'm always going to be biased. If I was with the NZ Defence Force, I'm going to think that our morals, this is just me being honest, I'm going to think that our morals and our cause is just. If I'm with the Australian Defence Force, I'm going to think that our morals, our cause, our values are just. It's just, if I'm fighting with the coalition, I'm going to be aligned and supportive of that coalition. Right or wrong, that's where I would be. And I think that's how these units would be. So anyway, let's carry on listening to Ben.
What difference would it make? I don't know.
I think you can. I mean, I say the British, on an individual level. Let's take the IRA for example. I say on an individual level, on average, British soldiers are had the moral high ground over the IRA. I say in general. When I say that, what I factor in is I would say that a lot of the IRA, on fact at an organisational level, especially in the later years, we're not a part of that organisation. Their objectives were not what they set out to do, and they were more on the greed side and influence side as opposed to a united Ireland. They took advantage of the situation, and the same can't be said for British soldiers. They can't do that.
I just don't think it's almost like saying, you know, it's like those questions about who are the better fighting force, the Roman Legion or the Crusaders or just see what I mean?
But you could also argue, mate, that so on the British soldier side, organised institutions like this, military institution like the British military, as you and I both experienced, we have morality and we have ethical guidelines drilled into us. You cannot say the same for you cannot say the same for less organised organisations like the IRA, certainly not the Iraqi insurgents, and certainly not the Taliban.
Man, that's a really good point. that Hugh makes. I was a bit skeptical at the start when I was listening to him speaking about that, but he's just given a really cool rationale in and around those morals, the ethics, the values, etc., that are drummed into you right from basic training. So I imagine that's the same. Not that I've done a UK basic training, but I imagine it's the same there where it starts, because that's where it starts in the New Zealand Defence Force and the Australian Defence Force, from what I've seen. And to then have your insurgency, Taliban, IRA. I know nothing about the IRA, but when you're looking at those, that's a bit more of the I guess the word and term that gets used, that asymmetric style fighting, militia, guerrilla type warfare. They're not they're not looking to comply with any sort of rules or ROEs. They're looking to win the battles that they feel are important to them, so that they can try to win the war, if that makes sense. So if that means, some people might say rolling up the sleeves, playing dirty, whatever the case might be, right or wrong, again, they believe that their cause is just, and they believe that what they're doing, right or wrong, in comparison to what others looking in might think, or an other more organised force, to Hugh's point, might determine as morally right for them. And I'm assuming here, so don't quote me on it, or take what I say with a pinch of salt throughout everything. For them, it's likely not an issue. It likely doesn't cross any morality issues for them, because of the cause and the reasons that they're fighting for. Now, greed and stuff aside, he started to touch on that. I know nothing about that. He's talking about the IRA, and it sounds like maybe people started to splinter off, but you could say the exact same thing today, this day and age. Governments, hidden agendas, conspiracies, greed. The list goes on. I don't think that's ever stopped. Just because a country like the UK, US, New Zealand, Australia, Canada, whatever, just because we may have a much more organised, seemingly organised, professional fighting forces, doesn't mean that there isn't blinking smoke and mirrors stuff happening in the background to line people's own individual pockets and build their own little empires. So yeah, it's a tough one. So where are we here? Ben claims there's no way to measure this. I agree with that. Take an individual Taliban and UK soldier, ask both, what are you prepared to do to win? Yeah. I mean, that's a great question. So maybe he's going to get to that. What the UK soldier is prepared to do on the battlefield might be more to our taste than what the Taliban would do. And then again, if you're talking individual level, it depends on who you're asking individually to win, and how committed they are to that cause, and to their cause. And as we know, Taliban and insurgents and stuff are pretty committed when you're talking suicide bombers. At the same time, though, not all the suicide bombers that are being used are willing. They're being forced, or they have been forced. So the narrative goes anyway. They've been forced because families have been held captive, blah, 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 blah. And if they don't do this, then they're going to execute their family members instead. So it's a tough one. So if those people, one for one, a committed insurgent soldier versus a committed UK soldier, or any soldier, what are they prepared to do? Is the Taliban insurgent, or that insurgent, whatever the enemy, prepared to blow themselves up, walk in and blow themselves up? Is the soldier, regardless of where they come from, prepared to jump on that grenade to save his mates? Or, what is it? And I don't know that you'd ever get the two to come together and sit at a table and have those discussions. It would be interesting, but I don't know how you can, or who's going to organise that. Put this to one side. If you look at the acts of coalition forces, look at the death, maiming, starvation, denial of healthcare, mass incarceration, torture. Add all this up and then tell me the morality of our society. Oh, okay, so we haven't got into that yet, so maybe this is going to come up, so I'll hit play again. Sorry.
You have a higher standard
Of what?
following moral and ethical guidelines. You have a standard there. And you have standardized doctrinal repercussions for breaching those. Sometimes not followed, but most of the time they are.
Yeah, I mean,
The IRA is a great example, actually.
But
that's a good point, what he's just said, and then he's backed it up. Like, again, good rationale. I can hear Ben's comment, though, based on, like, he's not convinced, and that, again, that's based on what he's seen. And so
the lady I was speaking to,
if we look at it, like, because sometimes we have to let these questions sink in, and the thing is what people tend to do is they tend to focus in on something, and there might be a certain truth to it at that level. So take an individual Taliban and an individual British soldier and ask them, what are you prepared to do to achieve your aims? And what the British soldier is prepared to do to achieve his aims, what he's willing to do on the battlefield, might be more to our taste than what the Taliban came up with. Right. Then let's park that to one side and stop all these hypothetical questions about, which footballer was the best, Maradona or Pele, and all this kind of stuff. And go, right, let's look at... It's surprising. So most Welsh people would say Maradona, but...
I've got Argentine family as well, so... Yeah.
And let's look at the actual... the whole picture, as if that's possible. And if we look at the actions of coalition forces in Iraq and Afghanistan and look at the death and the maiming and the starvation, the denial of healthcare, the destruction of the education systems in those countries, even the mass unemployment, the mass incarceration, the torture, add all that up and then tell me about the morality of our society. And I'm not having it, I'm not having it. It's this thing, it's this endless game of going, look at the water in this glass, and you're going, and it all comes out of this bottle over here. No, don't look at that. Look at this. Look at the glass. Look at the glass.
What about the situation in Afghanistan now? Do you think, so in Afghanistan now, and
that's, man, that's a good counter too, eh? Like, I say counter, I don't know if that's the right word, but that's a good response, I should say, to Hugh's really good response as well, in terms of the morality, the ethics, the teachings, the doctrinal pieces. They back all that up with regards to consequences if you breach and go outside those, versus other, I think Hugh used the term less organised organizations, or less trained, or whatever it was. I can't remember the exact words that he used. And then, I just read through and I'm looking at it again, what Ben has shared, putting all of that to one side. Then tell me the morality of our society. Man, it's a pretty cool and, in my opinion, valid point. I like how he also spoke about sometimes you've got to let these questions sink in a bit, because at a face value level, they can have valid, I can't remember the exact words that he shared, sorry, but at a face value level, initially they can have parts that, make a lot of sense, that, that's true, or that's accurate, or for want of a better term. But if you start letting it sink in a bit more and going a little bit deeper, you can, like what he's done. Hugh's given a great rationale and great response, and then equally, I think Ben's given an equally good response with regards to taking in the bigger picture. That is difficult when he says, if we can take a step back and take in the whole picture, if that's possible. I don't think it's possible to take in the whole picture, but I do think it's possible to take in a much bigger picture, like what Ben has just outlined and described. And that's why I say my 2 cents, I think it's a really good response from him. So anyway, the question here, were the actions of coalition forces morally bad overall? Were the actions of coalition forces morally bad overall? I don't have the answers for that. Like, personally, one, my brain's not big enough. Two, my experience, I don't have that. I don't even have the same level of experience, combat experience, as Ben and or Hugh Keir, to be fair and to be honest. Were the actions of coalition forces morally bad overall? Yeah, I honestly don't know. I'd like to think that they weren't, but I don't know. That's the truth of it. Yeah, so I'll move past that. What have we got now? Let's see. So there is another video. Oh, no, looks like it's the same video. 2 hours. Oh no. Oh yeah, 2 hours. So I'm skipping forward now to 2 hours, 13 minutes and 17 seconds. How Ben's former colleagues view him. 2 hours, 13, 17. 2 hours, 13, 17. Let's go from there. Let's play this out.
But I don't regret any of that speech. So it was a pretty good one, that one.
How do people you know view your refusal to redeploy and criticism of British wars?
I don't know. I mean,
Have you had much kickback from former colleagues?
You never know what's said in private, do you?
True.
You know,
I don't want to know either.
You never know what's said in private. But you know, I had a pretty good reference written to me. So when I refused to return to Iraq and I hadn't gone public, you know, pretty good reference from the CO. At that time, the RSM said, "You've changed your mind, come back." You know, so and definitely in terms of two para, but you know, I don't know about Hereford, but in terms of two para, I had a pretty good reputation amongst the blokes. You know, like over the years, many people have got in touch with me and, you know, not said nasty things. What was the question again?
Hang on, he's written some of the nasty things, yeah. The question was, how do people you know view your refusal to redeploy? How would you know how they review it? So you got another question, yeah. Well, what do you think of the negativity you receive? So he's referenced me. I'm going to say this because it's got him using. Hugh said, fuck's sake. Hugh said your description of military training is bollocks. I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure about the military training. And your view of ROE in Iraq, Afghanistan is total horseshit. I said this in a conversation with Geraint Jones, highly likely. And
on a podcast?
and in a Discord chat online. Okay.
This is crack up. Hugh's been called out here, and I like it. It's also good that he's reading out what it is. It sounds like he can't recall exactly what he said, but I like that he's reading out these pieces. I can't remember what he's said either, but I definitely haven't seen those interviews where Hugh has described that. But let's carry on before we get into the questions that have been asked.
Hey, look, right.
There's a couple of others I'm not going to read out, but
No, read them out.
I mean, the negative kickback. I mean, how would you?
Hey, look, right.
Thanks, Coke, mate. Thanks for that. Verbatim. And you should be thanking me for reading it out as well. Anyway.
It sounds like there might have been a couple of others, because I heard Ben say, no, read them out because it's fun, but I'm sure I heard Hugh say there's a couple of others, but I won't read them out. So he's read a few or a couple verbatim, but I don't know if there's a couple of others that he's intentionally left out. If he's read out those ones, he should have just read out the other ones. If there's
Nigel Ely, Parachute Falcons, SAS, I'm sure you know who he is, said you were very, very brave for refusing to redeploy.
Yes, you know,
does it sting at all that there may be people who you respected and worked
No.
with that think any less of you now?
No, I understand it. I completely understand it. If someone has that opinion, I understand it, but it doesn't bother me. You know, it doesn't bother me. You know, it's not something that I worry about or concern myself with. You know,
I'm going to jump in now and just go through the questions or the points. So 213.17, how Ben's former colleagues view him. 214.48, any negativity Ben received. And we heard Hugh read out some of the stuff that he said from other interviews. The question here for me is, if an Australian SAS soldier had done what Ben did, how would fellow members react? I don't know. I don't know how other fellow members would react. I could only speak for myself, what I would do if something like that happened. Now, I don't know of anybody that's from the Australian SAS that's gone and done that, that's refused to deploy. And I don't know anybody from the Australian SAS that's done that who I know personally. If I didn't know them and they chose to redeploy because they had their thoughts around this, I personally would probably be interested in wanting to know a little bit more. And probably personally, I'd probably be keen to have a chat with them just to go, hey, bro, what's the story? Just to have a better understanding myself, so it could give me a few things maybe to look out for. That would just be my take. If it was somebody that I knew and somebody that I respected and trusted, whether I was in their squadron or not, whether I was in their troop or not, I know for me that would hit different, because the people that I know, especially if I've gone through selection with them, gone through cycle with them, maybe we didn't end up in the same troop or squadron, but people that I've built a strong relationship with and that I still catch up with, even though we might not be in the same troop, same squadron, as much as we can, because they're usually on different tasks, different jobs, different training, etc. Man, that would be very different, because my respect and trust of that individual would be so much higher than somebody else that if I didn't know them personally, but they were an operator in the regiment. Yeah, hopefully that makes sense. My level of trust of what that person would say if I knew them in regards to allegations would just be at a higher level. And right or wrong, that's just how I feel about it. That's just where I feel like I would be. Question 2, next question. If you had a SAS colleague who'd done what Ben did, would you disagree and stop being friends with them? If you had a SAS colleague who'd done what Ben did, would you disagree and stop being friends with them? Probably not. Not unless it was proven that they were being an absolute bloody muppet or egg and they were wrong. But no, I can't say it. Like, I suppose the easiest example that I can provide is Ben Roberts-Smith as an example. And people probably aren't going to get to this part of the video anyway, so it's not like I'm trying to use it or putting it in a YouTube title to clickbait people to come in here. But I share this with no other intent other than to try to answer this question with an example. If you had an SAS colleague who'd done what Ben did, so interesting, Ben Roberts-Smith, Ben Griffin, would you disagree and stop being friends with them? I can say now for me, if Ben Roberts-Smith has done and did the things that have been stated that he's done, committing war crimes, shooting, murdering, unarmed, captured POWs, I'd be devastated. Personally, I'd be gutted. For him, for the regiment, for those that witnessed it, not necessarily for those that witnessed it and did nothing, but for those that witnessed it and not even felt like they could do it. Like, it's a choice at the end of the day. So no, I wouldn't. I'd be disappointed and gutted for that whole team, for Ben in particular, for Ben Roberts-Smith, if that was something that he did. But for me, I think I've shared in another video too, when people ask me about why do you have yourself standing with the Victoria Cross winner who's charged with war crimes, blah, blah, blah. People saying he's guilty when everything that I've seen has been alleged and I haven't seen any guilty verdict come out. I don't think, personally, I can't see myself, I've had plenty of time to think about it, right? I can't see myself automatically just stopping saying I'm not Ben's friend anymore, blanking out his face and no longer showing his face anymore. I show his face in that piece on my intro, which I've explained, I think more so in a comment reply, because it's a small way of me still showing my support and that I am his friend. Like, I'm not just going to turn the friend switch, if there is a switch, the friend switch off, because potentially, if he has, like I've said, if he's done something wrong because you've made a mistake, far out. I think me and anybody, you included, if you're watching this video, would have no mates if people turn their back on you because you made a mistake. Now, granted, some mistakes are are heavier and bigger and carry more weights than others. I get it. But I can't see myself at this stage. Maybe that changes later on. Maybe there's a whole bunch of things. Maybe he confesses to some horrific stuff. Who knows? I don't know. Maybe that might change my thought and opinion. But right now it doesn't. So to this question, would I stop being friends with them if somebody chose to not redeploy because of what they felt was wrong in terms of we're just raiding and capturing innocent civilians and handing them over to be tortured? No, I'm not going to stop being their friend because their moral compass is affected and impacted and they don't feel that they can do their job anymore. They have my respect forever. I'll likely still be their friend forever, as long as they wanted to be my friend, you know. They might not want to be my friend because if I chose to carry on doing the job, it works both ways, eh? They might go, well, Joe, if you don't stop, you and I can't be friends anymore. It's like, whoa, that's a different question. You could go anywhere, eh, with these scenarios, with these hypothetical questions. Would I walk away from the job for the sake of my friendship? Here's the question. If I didn't experience that, if I didn't witness it, if I wasn't convinced that what they're telling me is happening, and if I felt like I needed to see it for myself, then I'd probably sacrifice that friendship. Or I might ask and say, hey, can you give me a chance to go and see if this is what's happening as per what you're saying? And if it is, like, I'll walk with you as well. But if it isn't, you know, there's a whole bunch of different scenarios that could come into play there on that question. So anyway, that's that piece. How are we? Well, I'm going to keep going because there's another video and there's some more questions and it looks like it's from the same video. So 2 hours 28:49. So let's scroll forward to that. 2 hours 28:49. Let's go from here.
See what's going on there. Crazy what happens in all the wars, to be honest. But anyway, okay. Last one. How did you learn to deal with your PTSD and other mental health challenges? What advice would you give someone who's experiencing or was experienced the same as what you did?
That is difficult, and that's very difficult because you could do more harm than good by giving advice to anyone about this stuff. You know, I think these things are, it's possible that these things manifest very differently in people. And that the way of living with these things might be different for different people. And so to sort of like advocate a course of action.
You can communicate your experience.
Yeah, but I wouldn't want to. I really think you can be. There needs to be some care with that.
Yeah,
I understand. You know, like, and it's not the case of sort of like withholding information or having a lack of empathy for someone who's going through that. But you know, these things can be so complex. They really can. You know, because for example, for years I managed a lot of it with alcohol, and at least one experienced professional told me that I should carry on doing that.
Carry on?
Yep.
No.
Yep.
Oh, GP?
No. Someone experienced in PTSD psychology, you know, like a psychologist.
Yeah. Jesus.
Because his opinion was that, and he had extensive experience working with veterans with PTSD, that sometimes it was a good holding, like that you wouldn't, if you came off the booze, you wouldn't be able to cope because the booze deadens things.
Wow. That's oh heck, I just see it here as well. It's actually put into this part. How Ben learnt to cope with PTSD and being advised by a professional to keep drinking. He's just mentioned that. Holy heck. I can understand where Ben's coming from in terms of coping and managing. So the question, how has he learned to deal with his PTSD, and what advice would he give to other people? It makes sense now why he was, is hesitant the word? Yeah, maybe hesitant, slower to respond. The care that he's saying needs to be taken. There's lots of things, what you giving advice, you could make things worse, etc. I like his honesty about how he used alcohol for, sounds like a long period of time to manage for him, which I suppose isn't too surprising for people, whether they're former veterans or serving members or not, just based on, I guess, the sort of pattern that seems to happen, and which is fairly well known in terms of people turning to alcohol and drugs, which is unfortunate. But coming back to here, it makes sense now why he says why he is quite cautious about what advice you could give. Could cause more harm than good. Far out. A PTSD or clinical psychologist sounds like professional, so it's not a GP, a professional in the PTSD space, I'm assuming some sort of psych degree, told him to keep drinking, because if he came off the booze, he would not be able to cope. Man, I don't think that's good advice. Like, I'm no expert in that. I just don't think that's good advice. That could be music to people's ears that struggle with PTSD and who are currently using alcohol. That could be music to their ears and go, see, look, it's good. A former SAS soldier was told to keep drinking. Man, I don't think that's the type of message that you want to be putting out there. Anyway, that's a big one. The question here is this good or bad advice in your view? I think it's bad advice, personally. Again, I don't have any clinical psychology qualifications or anything that qualifies me to give advice on PTSD. But I just don't see that as being good advice from anybody. I would love it if whoever this professional was come out, and maybe Hugh could get them on the HL podcast and go, can you explain for us and give us the rationale and or the clinical psychology studies and facts and information, whatever, data, as to why you would tell Ben Griffin, who appears to be struggling with PTSD and who's turned to alcohol, why you would encourage them or tell them to keep drinking. Like, I would sit and love to hear that particular interview. So, do I think it's good advice? No, I don't. I think it's poor advice. That's just my take. Have you heard this advice being given before by medical professionals? No, I haven't. Never. This is the first time that I've ever heard anything like that. So, that's shocking, surprising, and yeah, I just don't think it's good advice. Anyway, this has gone for nearly an hour, 55 minutes, just under 56 minutes. I'm not going to edit it other than doing remove the background, have the video footage, and then just let it run, because I wanted to try to get through all of those questions for this particular video, skipping and jumping to those parts without having any of the other information prior to going into those. But from what I've seen, what I've heard in those parts, it seems like there was enough information for me anyway, to chuck in my 2 cents, right or wrong, whether that's a good way of doing it, whether that's the wrong way of doing it. Each of you are going to have your own thoughts and opinions on it. I've done the best that I can in providing my reactions to the questions that have come through to those specific parts where they've asked me to go to that. And I'm grateful that this person has, paid me not a small amount of money for my 2 cents and my opinion on this. So very, very grateful to that person. Hey, it's on YouTube. I don't think there's anything sinister behind the person's request to me. The communication that I've had with this person has been really open and transparent. And yeah, I mean, people will interpret my reaction how they want to. They'll either disregard it, or they might go, or some people may enjoy it. I don't know. But I feel like I've done what I can in terms of this particular request for this element anyway. I think there's a couple more pieces that I need to do, which I'm willing to do as well. So I'll jump into those, and maybe I'll bring this one forward in terms of the reaction piece. So anyway, If you made it this far, appreciate you as always. Thank you very much for your time. And yeah, as always, as per usual, the message is the same. Any hard times, challenges that you're going through, keep turning up, keep staying in the fight, keep putting one foot in front of the other, take one day at a time. Know that the sun will shine again, that there are better days ahead, those better days are coming for you. There's difficult times that we're in right now, that you may be in, that we may be in, are temporary. They will not last forever. Good days are coming for you, and they are closer than you think. So just stay in it, keep turning up. There are people that need you, there are people that want you around, and be kinder to yourself, okay? Give yourself a chance, be kinder to yourself, take one day at a time. As always, go always a little further. Remember, who dares wins and who cares wins. And until the next video, there's a big mana wave coming from me to you, filled with my aroha, respect, appreciation, and gratitude for you all.